In this video, I'm going to be covering the first steps that you should be taking as a home buyer here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. Whether you are a first-time home buyer, maybe this is the first time you've ever looked at purchasing a home, and you've come to the realization that they really don't teach you how to purchase a home in school, or maybe you are someone who is an experienced home buyer and you just want a quick refresher on what it is to expect as you are getting out there in the market. Maybe you have searched online, you've seen a lot of the misinformation and inaccuracies out there. Well, you are in the right place. Whatever it is that brings you to the channel today, understand that many of my clients have been in the exact same situation that you are today. And my promise to my clients is to explain all of these things in an easy to understand way, from what to expect, how to operate, and what exactly it is that needs to be done in order for you to be successful. In this video in particular, I'm going to give you a little lowdown on what I feel the first steps are to take here as a home buyer here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. That's going to be covering things such as getting financing, understanding pre-approvals, and how your financing pairs up. Because in today's market, I oftentimes will tell buyers that you are more likely to be competing with other buyers than you will be competing with the seller. And I want you to understand how your financing pairs up against the competition. I'll also be covering what to look for in the agent that you hire, and then how to shop for homes online. You might have noticed this already, but a lot of those online home search engines can be a week to 2 weeks outdated. And I want to make sure that my clients are looking in the right areas. And then what should we be looking for when we're actually out there at showings, looking at houses, maybe what certain things we should be cautious of. I also have a very deep conversation with people about privacy in home showings today. Understand that there are Ring doorbells, Alexa devices everywhere nowadays, and a lot of sellers are watching these things. From there, I'll cover what it is that you should be thinking about when we make a competitive offer, because again, we are more likely to be competing with other buyers than we are competing with the seller. And then once you get an accepted offer, what to expect from acceptance to closing, along with all of the contingencies and different hurdles that can arise as you go throughout the process. If you don't have an agent who explains all these things to you, this could lead to confusion down the road. You might have a sense of a loss of control. You might actually be missing out on properties of interest to you. They might be sold before you even get a chance to even know that they were even for sale. And oftentimes you can see easy mistakes get made where you lose out on tens of thousands of dollars, either during the midst of the transaction or over the course of home ownership. And you could potentially miss out on that property and ultimately just have a lot of wasted time. Before I get too much into this, my name is Alex Mayer. I'm an associate broker here at eXp Realty Rochester and winner of Rochester's Best Real Estate Agent in the year of 2022, and 3 times nominated for that position through the local Post-Bulletin newspaper. I've represented hundreds of Rochester area locals here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. I encourage you to go ahead and look at my online reviews. I personally have over 200 5-star reviews online, and I encourage you to read those things. And the reason why I bring these things up is a lot of agents are great on the marketing side, but they're not so great on the client service side. And I like to be great at both. So I strongly encourage you to look at those reviews if you are considering hiring me, which I encourage you do. I personally have over 14 years of experience in negotiations, multiple credentials and awards in the area, along with personally negotiating on behalf of hundreds of clients in real estate transaction here in the Rochester, Minnesota areas. I say these things so that you know that I am credible, knowledgeable, and an authority in this marketplace. I'm very passionate about real estate. My promise to my clients is that they will know what to expect, how to operate, and what needs to be done in order to be successful, and it all explained to you in an easy to understand way. I'm getting messages, calls, text messages from people just like you every single day, and I encourage you to reach out. You will find that I keep my contact information down below. I encourage you to go ahead and text me, call me. You can fill out one of the forms, so I'll get back to you at my earliest ability as far as that goes. And know that I sincerely appreciate every single one of you that do. Roughly 25% of my business has come from these online videos over the course of the years. I love talking about real estate, showing how everything really fits together and explaining it all in an easy to understand way. And if this is your first time in the channel, please click the like, subscribe, and ring that bell to get the most recent updates on what is going on here in the Rochester, Minnesota area today. And let's dive in. If I had to pick just one place to start for a buyer, it would be to look at your financial options right away. And like I mentioned earlier, I encourage people to do this because I want you to understand how your financing pairs up against the competition. I tell my buyers that there are roughly 6 different types of financing involved, and there's variations within each of them. There's different terms and contingencies involved in each one, and different banks and loan officers offer different programs for each individual type of financing. And I really want people to understand not just what it is they qualify for, but how it pairs up against the competition so that you can make good, intelligent decisions when we're out there shopping and making offers on properties. In fact, in my opinion, I think people should really get a head start on figuring out what their financial situation months in advance of actually starting their home search. And the reason why I say this is there might be something that we could do today, such that if we made an adjustment with your credit, with your income, with assets that you have available to you, that we could potentially set you up for better success 2-3 months down the road. And I know I can't tell you how many times in my career I've had someone tell me that they're not nervous about the financial situation at all. And then when they are ready to start shopping, they get their credit pulled just to find out that there was some $150 collection bill that's affecting their credit. Maybe there was a late payment somewhere that affected their credit score just enough so they actually didn't qualify for the optimal type of financing it is that they were actually looking for. I've even seen buyers get to that point and they actually find out that they are not able to actually qualify for a home purchase. So in my opinion, it is best for you to get a sense of what your financial situation is months in advance of actually starting your home search, not just so that you know what you qualify for, so that maybe we can actually figure out ways to improve your financial situation so that when you are ready to purchase a home, there is a better opportunity for you on whatever type of financing is that's available to you. When banks are approving people for a loan, they're looking at 3 key things. They're looking at income, assets, and credit history. When I talk about income, they want to know that you are employed, whether you are a W-2 employee and they're just going to want to see pay stubs, or maybe you are 1099 like myself as an independent contractor. They're going to want to see tax returns. They're going to want to know that you have steady and reliable income so that you can actually afford that payment. And they're basing what they pre-approved you on based off of what's called a debt to income ratio. So most people have some level of debt already that they have, whether that's auto loans, student loans, credit card debt, whatever it is that it happens to be. Well, they're only going to allow you to have a percentage of your total income for debt obligations, and that includes your monthly mortgage payment. And that's going to be a combination of your principal, interest, taxes, mortgage insurance, homeowners insurance. And it's important that you understand how these things are actually going to affect the payment that you're getting into and what it is that you can afford ultimately for a price point. So I always encourage people to have conversations with a loan officer up front about those things so that we can structure these things out in a reliable way. But again, they're looking at income, they're looking at your credit history. They want to know you have history of making payments on time. Sometimes I have a client come to me and they say that they're going to be fine as far as purchasing a home because they don't have any debt. And that is not necessarily a good thing either. You don't want to be what we call a ghost. You want to have some sort of experience purchasing or having paid down debt obligations in the past. Don't let this be something that makes you afraid if that is a situation that you are in. I have had clients go from having no credit history to closing on a home within 6 months. Just have a deeper conversation with me up front about that, and I'll show you some of the key tips and tricks that you can do in order to set yourself up to show that you have that credit history that the banks are looking for. And then the final thing they're looking at is your assets. So when I talk about assets, they are going to want to know where you got the money for your down payment and your closing costs. And maybe that's a touchy subject for you right now. I've had a lot of clients over the years that have come to me and they don't think that they have enough money for a down payment to purchase a property. I oftentimes will tell buyers that the most common down payment that I see here in the Rochester, Minnesota area for a first time or even a second time home buyer is usually between 3 and 5% down. You know, a lot of people seem to think they have to have 20% down. 3 to 5% down seems to be the most common down payment that I see. Now, of course, if you can afford to put 20% down, then you are going to be in a much better situation as far as those financial options go, as we had discussed earlier. But I want you to understand how those assets pair up. They're going to want to know where you got that money. So you want to make sure that you source that effectively. There are also certain types of financing that want to know that the money has been in your account for a longer period of time, whether that's 2 months or 3 months. We call these reserves. They want to know that you have the money available for the down payment, the closing costs, and that you can afford the payments down the road if something were to happen. God forbid you were to lose a job and you needed to make sure you were able to pay your mortgage payments on time. But they're going to want to know where you got that money, how long you have had it, and they're going to want to know that it is something that is going to be consistent as well. You don't want to be in a situation where you are ready to purchase a home and you are been sitting on $10,000 in cash, or maybe you got it in a different bank account, or maybe you're getting a gift from a family member to help you with your down payment and closing costs, only to find out that they need to make sure that that money's been in your bank account for 60 days. And I have had this happen to clients. So it's important that you understand where that money is coming from. The banks understand where that money is coming from and how it is that you are applying that towards your down payment and closing costs. So income, assets, credit history. Now, I always tell buyers as well, different banks offer different terms, different interest rates, different programs. So just because one bank doesn't qualify you doesn't mean that another bank won't. And this is one thing I have a conversation with a lot of my clients about, because maybe we have them talk to one loan officer and it doesn't work out, or maybe it doesn't pre-approve them for the exact amount that it is that they are looking for. And then we have them speak to another loan officer who is actually able to get them everything it is that they want as far as that financing goes. I always make my recommendations on who it is I think a buyer should work with as a loan officer based upon that buyer's specific situation. If you are in a situation where you maybe don't have a lot of funds available for the down payment, there might be a low down payment or a grant program or a down payment assistance program that may be of benefit to you. For a lot of my first-time home buyers, there's a really great program called the Minnesota Housing Loan, and I work with the very best loan officer here in the city of Rochester who offers that. And that is actually a program where you can get up to an interest-free loan of $16,500 from the state of Minnesota to help you with your down payment and closing costs. This is a very real program. I'm not a loan officer, so you have to make sure that you qualify for it, but I usually will have anywhere between 1 and 2 clients utilize that program every single month here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. And believe me when I tell you that I have had clients purchase homes here in Rochester for less than $1,000 out of pocket. This is a very real program. If you'd like to know more about that, reach out to me directly and I'll have a deeper conversation with you about how it is that we can connect you with that loan officer. But I want people to understand what it is that they qualify for today, so that when we are in a situation when they're ready to purchase a home, we have better options overall. Maybe it's a situation where you are just now getting ready to purchase a home and you want to have a loan officer who can get you pre-approved quickly. There are loan officers here in the city of Rochester who can get you pre-approved with just a 15-minute phone call. So if that is something that you are looking to do, reach out to me directly and I will give you the skinny on exactly what it is that you need to do in order to get that done. Now, I would put hiring a great real estate agent right up there with figuring out your financial situation. And I do mean hiring a great real estate agent as well. In fact, in many markets, roughly 3% of agents are doing roughly 45% of the business. And here in the Rochester, Minnesota area, I would say that that is pretty clear as well. There are probably anywhere between 40 and 60% of agents doing the vast majority of the business here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. So who you hire definitely and certainly does matter, and not all agents are created equal. In fact, according to the National Association of Realtors, the average real estate agent did less than 4 transactions last year. In my opinion, doing only 1 house sale in a quarter, and understand there is a buy side in a transaction and a sell side of a transaction. So if they're only doing 4 transactions a year and half, they might have only represented a buyer 2 times that year or represented a seller 2 times that year as well. But understand that, in my opinion, if you're doing only 1 house a quarter, that is just simply not enough experience to have a feet in the street experience to do a good job for your clients. I don't really believe that an agent can do a good negotiation job on behalf of their clients if they aren't consistently doing consistent business over time. Otherwise, they're going to be in a situation where they might need your house to close more than you do in order to get paid so that they can afford their mortgage. You do not want to be in a situation where an agent will get emotional about that. In fact, in my opinion, I don't really even think that just doing 1 house sale a month is actually enough of a feet in the street experience to do a good job on behalf of clients as well. Personally, I do anywhere between 4 and 6 transactions a month. I'm always trying to do a little bit more than that. Actually, recently with eXp Realty, there's 1,400 agents in Minnesota. And I recently got ranked number 5 in the state overall. And I would really love to beat those agents up in the cities who have a much higher sales price. But I need to do an additional 2-3 transactions a month in order to do that. So I'd really love your opportunity to earn your business and show you what it is I do. So I encourage you to reach out to me. Just understand that not all agents are equal. Not all agents are created equal. There are definitely differences in the agents as far as how much experience they have, which is one of the key things that I tell people to ask people. Ask your agent what their experience is. And I don't just mean how long that they have been in the business, because there are agents that have been in the business for 40 years that I trust less than agents that have been in the business for 4 weeks. And I mean that because just because you've been licensed for a long time doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing a considerable amount of business. In fact, there's an agent that I know quite regularly here in the city of Rochester. He's been licensed for 40 years and he does roughly 10 to 12 transactions a year, which again, in my opinion, is not enough to be a consistent and reliable agent to work with. You want someone who is doing business in a consistent way, weekly, daily, doing real estate. That is what is important to you. And if they are, I want you to understand there's not really a lot of experience there for you to trust that they know what's going on in today's market, right? Second thing I tell people to look at is to look at their reviews, right? And I always encourage people to look at mine. I have over 200 five-star reviews here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. They are all from clients who have worked with me directly. You will find that they were very thorough and they speak exactly to my core values, which are education, communication, and responsiveness. I want to explain things to people in an easy to understand way, and I want to be responsive to them. Because I'm consistently doing videos like this, I actually have more time available to my clients because they're actually reaching out to me directly from these things. I have a quick educational period where I go over everything that they need to expect in the marketplace, and then we are out there actually shopping. I also tell people to ask the agents how it is that they handle negotiations. I think this is something that actually gets missed out quite a bit. In fact, I've seen agents within a week of getting licensed go out and say that they are negotiation experts. And I'm telling you, I've been licensed in multiple states. There is 90 hours of coursework to be licensed as a real estate agent here in the state of Minnesota. And not one of those hours has anything to do with negotiations. Now, personally, I have multiple credentials in negotiations. I've been in negotiations since I was 18 years old. I'm 34 now. So is that 16 years at this point? I've represented hundreds of clients here in transactions. I know some of the ins and outs. And I actually know a lot of the big name players here in the Rochester, Minnesota area as well. So we have a good working relationship, and I can oftentimes get in a situation where we might be in multiples where I've had an agent give us a counteroffer simply because they know my clients are more educated and they have had experience working with me and my team in the past, which I also make a note of that as well. Make sure that the agent that you'll be working with is the agent you'll be working with directly. I can't tell you how many times I've had a buyer talk to me after they purchased a home, and they said that they worked with X agent and they understood that that was who they were working with, and then they actually got pawned off to another agent who maybe was a little bit more experienced. So when you're working with these teams or groups here in the Rochester, Minnesota area, make sure that you're actually working with that agent specifically. Any agent that reaches out to me directly works with me directly and personally as their real estate professional. I always tell clients, you want big enough to matter, small enough to care. You don't want to be in a situation where you're just a number in a large team overall. And then the last thing I always tell people is make sure that your agent explains compensation to you up front. In fact, this is a recent litigation, a recent settlement that was determined between the National Association of Realtors and a few sellers down in, I want to say, Missouri. And there was the situation where agents weren't disclosing how it is that they were compensated to their buyers up front. They were saying that they were free to buyers when they were in fact getting compensated from the seller. They weren't covering what it was that they were charging when they were actually out there shopping for properties. And then when they got to a situation where they were making an offer on the property, then they brought that up front to them. I always cover what I charge, what it is that's going on as far as those things goes with my clients before we actually even start any home searches out there. Again, my initial presentation and consultation on all of these things is anywhere between 60 and 90 minutes, depending on that person's situation. If they're a first-time home buyer, second-time home buyer, if they're selling as well, can really vary as far as how long that goes. But this is a recent thing, and I think it's going to be a federal restriction here in July or August of this year. Minnesota state law has actually been consistent on this since I got in the business back in 2016. They have required written representations agreements, written contracts for representation here in the state of Minnesota, but there are certainly agents and top producing agents here in Rochester, Minnesota area that I know for a fact are not doing those things. So make sure that they are covering those things with you right away. With first-time home buyers, I also will have a deeper discussion with them exactly what to expect from the upfront costs associated with the purchase of property, what earnest money is, which is the money that you give to the seller to show that you are serious about the purchase of the property. I also want to cover what to expect for inspection fees, how do we handle inspections, what to expect for appraisal fees, what an appraisal is and what it isn't. A lot of people get inspections and appraisals confused. There is no pass fail on an inspection. An appraisal is so that the bank can feel confident that there's adequate collateral in the purchase that you are in the property you are purchasing. They do not want to be in a situation where they give you a $400,000 loan on a property that's only worth $360,000. And then from there, I want to break down the different sort of transaction milestones as you are going throughout the purchase, what sort of out-of-pocket expenses that you need to expect from down payment to closing costs. If closing costs are a little over your head right now, reach out to me directly and I'll have a deeper conversation with you about what that is as well. Just real briefly, those are a combination of loan origination fees, taxes, homeowners insurance, mortgage insurance, title fees, transaction fees, recording fees that are part of your purchase that are due at the closing table. And I want people to understand what those things are. So you're not getting the closing table just to find out that you need an additional $7,000 to close on it. I want my buyers to understand what they're getting into up front so that we can make good, informed, intelligent decisions throughout the purchase of the property. Now, I do also want to make a note on how to actually be shopping for homes online. You might have actually noticed this already, but a lot of those online home search engines, they can be a week to 2 weeks outdated. And if you're not looking in the right areas, there's a very good chance that you are missing out on properties. Many of the clients, when they first reach out, then they've actually already found this, right? If you're looking on the Zillows, the Redfins, the Realtors, those home search engines, it can be a week to 2 weeks outdated. And the reason for that is they are based off of large national geographical algorithms. They're just not specific to our local Rochester, Minnesota area. And I want to make sure my clients are looking in the right areas so that when the property comes up that they like, they're able to get into that right away. As far as scheduling showings go, it's much easier for you to have an agent representing you, so you can go out there and schedule showings in a row. I can usually hit anywhere between 3 and 4 showings inside of a couple hours here in the Rochester, Minnesota area, depending on the drive time, of course. Now, when it comes to showings, I always ask my clients to be a little aware that we are operating based off of what the seller's availability is. Sometimes they have a 1 or 2 hour showing notice request. Sometimes it's 24 hours. I see that oftentimes in rental properties where they have to give a tenant notice as far as how long it is, or when they have to give them a 24-hour notice when they can get access to that property. Right. There are also situations where those properties are go and show as well, which means we can just go out there right away. When it comes to showings, I always tell my buyers, I would rather you show up late to a showing than show up early. Now, if you show up early, there's a good chance that you could run into the seller, which can be kind of awkward. You might run into another agent and their buyer, which again can be kind of awkward as well. And a quick note on that, sometimes there are overlapping showings where there are multiple agents there with their buyers at the same time. That does happen from time to time with how competitive here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. So I want people to be aware of that. But I always tell my buyers, if you're going to be 10 minutes late, that's fine. If you're going to be more than 10 minutes late, just shoot me a message, give me a call, let me know that you're on your way. But again, I would much rather you show up late to a showing than show up early to a showing, because it can be just a little bit awkward if you run into that seller. You might say something that could actually hurt you. And a note on that as well. Again, privacy in home showings today is near non-existent. There are Ring doorbells, Alexa devices, baby monitors, security cameras, and sellers are watching this. I know they are because they tell me that they are watching this. There have also been situations where I know sellers have been just across the street and they are watching buyers go through their properties. And I want you to make sure that you are being careful of what you are saying when we are inside the house as far as price, terms, and motivation goes. I'm also going to tell you that it's important that you don't say something that could be potentially insulting to a seller. If we are the ones making an offer on that property and you made some comment about some picture that they had on the wall, the way they painted something, or why would they do this thing, that might hurt them emotionally inside. They may not want to work with this. This is something I have conversations with sellers all the time. We want to separate the emotions from the sale of the property. Same thing with buyers as well. Just be cautious what you are saying inside of the house. These things can oftentimes be overlooked. Again, just a simple echo device can actually hear exactly what's going on, and sellers can listen to what you are saying in that property. We want you to be careful what you are saying inside that property. Ideally, the way that I like to handle negotiations, I prefer to walk around the outside of the property first and get a sense of where the grading, where's the water going to run when it gets wet outside. Is it going to be running towards the property or away from the property? The four most expensive parts of a property, in my experience, have always been foundation. I put windows as number 2. If you've ever replaced a window, you know what I'm talking about. And then I put roof and siding as number 3, and then the furnace as number 4. And oftentimes, if you're replacing a furnace, you're probably replacing an AC unit as well. So those are the more expensive things. From there, we go inside the property, get a tour, an idea of the layout and everything as far as the property goes. I do give reasons for my clients not to purchase property. I am not an inspector, but I have enough experience to be dangerous in this field, and I want to make sure that I'm pointing out anything and disclosing anything that could potentially hurt that client's use and enjoyment of the property. It does not matter to me which property it is that you purchase. I just want to make sure that you get the property that you want to purchase. Now, eventually, when we're out there shopping, you are going to find something that you like, and then a lot of really big decisions are going to have to happen really fast, and that is because we will be making an offer on that property. I always tell my clients that oftentimes the offer is won not in the purchase price, but actually in the terms of the contract that you write. And it's important that you're working with an experienced agent who can explain to you what these terms, what these contingencies, and what certain things we can do in the midst of making an offer to set you up for success if you find that property that you actually like. It's not uncommon for me to see a situation where maybe we are, $5,000, $10,000 less than the highest offer, but that my buyer still win just because of the way that we structure the offer overall. So it's important that you understand these things. I always tell buyers that there are really 6 key things to making an offer, and there are obviously a lot more than that, but 6 key things that I bring up to them. Number 1 is going to be what the purchase price is. Then it's going to be if we are going to be asking the seller for closing costs, and then what ultimately the net sales price is to that seller. In fact, I would say that the seller really only cares what the net sales price is. So as a rule of thumb, closing costs in the city of Rochester are usually around 3% of the purchase price. So think of a $300,000 house. $9,000 roughly is what you're going to need for your closing costs. Again, every situation is unique and specific to the property you're purchasing and your type of financing. But if we wanted to net the seller $300,000 for the sale of their property, but we needed to ask them for $9,000 to contribute towards your closing costs to help pay those things off, which is something you can do, but we actually need to offer is $309,000, right? Because then at the closing table, they will give you that $9,000 to pay those things off. It will still be in your mortgage if you have one, but it is a situation that can really help with your out-of-pocket expenses when you are actually out there purchasing a property. I always tell buyers there are really only 2 numbers that I really want you to focus on. That's your out-of-pocket expenses and your monthly payment. If you're good with those 2 numbers, I tell people to move forward with a purchase. I also want to state I don't want buyers to get sticker shock on the property they're purchasing. It is possible to get the same payment on a $300,000 house as you do on a $350,000 house. It's just going to be dependent on the situations and things like taxes, homeowners insurance, mortgage insurance, and what ultimately goes into your financing options. So I don't want people to get sticker shock. I want them to focus on monthly payment and out-of-pocket expenses overall. Aside from purchase price and net sales price, there is if you are going to be having an inspection on a property. In the state of Minnesota, inspections are optional. They are not required. I will also tell you that you want to make sure that when you do hire an inspector, make sure that they are credible. It is not uncommon for me to see a situation where someone says they are an inspector and really they get out to the property, walk around for 15 minutes and say that it's good. I always tell clients, I have a list of good qualified inspectors that you can work with. So we know that you're working with someone who is reliable. Just understand that in the state of Minnesota, it's one of the few states that does not require that an inspector has a license. So make sure that your inspector is credible and that you know what you're getting into with those things as well. But you have to have the inspection contingency box checked on your purchase agreement when you are making an offer. And it's important to make sure that your agent knows how to check that box correctly. I have seen some really atrocious purchase agreements submitted to me when I've been representing sellers in the past, where there are errors, there are numbers missing, there are boxes checked that could have potentially really hurt the buyer that they were representing because they did not check the right boxes. So make sure that you are reading the purchase agreement and you know what you're getting into when you are making those offers as well. Next is earnest money. Earnest money is the money that you give to the seller to show that you have skin in the game on the purchase of property. Now, you do get that earnest money back at the closing table for your down payment and closing costs to help you pay for those things. It's just money you give to the seller to show that you're not just going to get cold feet and back out of the deal. Now, if you do have an inspection contingency and you make a contingent upon it, you actually can cancel that purchase agreement and get that earnest money check back as a buyer. right? That's another round of negotiations and the inspections. I'll cover that in another video as well. From there, understand what we are going to be having for closing date. The seller is going to want to know roughly when it is that you expect to close. You're going to want to know when you get possession of the property as well. Sometimes those things can be different in negotiations, but ideally, I'd like to have closing and possession date at the same time as well. And those are target dates, but the seller and everybody, including you, the loan officer, everyone involved in a real estate transaction, is going to want to hit that closing date, that target date ideally. If we miss closing dates, things can go haywire, especially in a situation where you are purchasing a property from a seller who's purchasing another property, who maybe that seller is also purchasing a property. There is a domino effect in real estate. I want people to understand what goes into those things. And again, sometimes the offer is one in the terms, not necessarily the purchase price. Ideally, you would make just one offer and you would get an accepted offer, but it's not uncommon for me to represent clients who they've been in a situation where they've made 4 or 5 offers before they've ultimately won. Sometimes it's a situation where the market's really crazy and we're seeing $10, $20, $30,000 over asking. Contingencies are waived, and it can make it really difficult for a buyer to win. But I always tell people, even when we don't win the house, we definitely win the lesson, and my buyers get smarter every single time that we're out there. When I make an offer, I always will call the listing agent and have a direct conversation with them about what is important to the seller. Right? Whether it's closing date, whether it's earnest money, purchase price, net sales price, what's most important to them so that we can structure our offer in a way that is going to be more attractive to them and more likely to get your offer accepted. I'm also going to be sending a very thorough email breaking down the specifics of what goes into the offer that we're making. My contracts are aces every single time. I've written probably thousands of them at this point. So I really want people to understand that I know what I'm doing when it comes to those things. I'm also going to break down a very thorough email that outlines exactly what goes into it. Many of the other agents in the marketplace have had experience working with me in the past. They know that my clients are well educated and they know exactly what to expect. Sorry about that. My pup was just wrestling with me. But understand that the way that we structure your offer can actually set you up for success when we are actually out there making offers. And you want to make sure you have an agent who's skilled at negotiations that can make sure that we have a good fighting chance of actually winning that property. Now, ideally, again, you will win on your first offer you make out there, but understand that that is not always the case. And sometimes we just need to have a little bit more experience in that marketplace for that buyer in order to actually win that property. But eventually you will find the right property and we will ultimately end up closing on it, which brings me to the next part. Okay, what to expect from contract to close. I always tell my buyers, I want you to take a little bit of time to celebrate because ideally you'll only get one accepted offer as you are out there shopping at any given time, unless something goes wrong, of course. But I always tell people take time to celebrate because that's usually one of the harder parts of winning in today's market. But that is really just kind of the start of the job for what it is that we do as real estate professionals. Oftentimes, I'm going to be having conversations with people about what those transaction milestones are throughout the process of purchasing a home, including in that initial consultation. But I also want to remind people at this point as well. Number one is going to be depositing that earnest money. We typically use a system called trust funds. They do currently charge $8 for that right now as a wire transfer service. Your earnest money is going to be sitting in the listing brokerage's trust account typically, and you'll get that money again back at closing if you cancel due to an inspection contingency, or let's say the financing doesn't work out, which I'm going to talk about right now. If you have an inspection contingency, we try to do those anywhere between 7 and 14 days. Usually the shorter the term, the more likely it is the seller is going to feel attractive with those things as well. When inspections come up, we are going to want to line up the inspection. Inspections here in Rochester usually range anywhere from $350 to $500 to $600, depending on what sort of inspections it is that you are doing on that property. Again, make sure that the inspector you work with is credible. When we actually do a inspection, it's usually anywhere between 2 and 3 hours long for a formal general inspection, and we have to pay that inspector upfront. So typically that $300 to $600 that goes to the inspector for his or her time at the property. I usually encourage my buyers to give them the first 2 to 2.5 hours on their own. We show up at the last half hour and they'll give us a presentation, explain everything that goes into us as well, into the house as well. Their job is to find anything that's wrong with that property as well. And they're not always is the inspector a contractor in the specific areas that it is that they are talking about. Their idea is to have a general idea about what's going on and disclose anything to you that might hurt your use and enjoyment on the property. And again, an inspection is not pass fail. An inspection is for your peace of mind so that you know what you are getting into. I tell my buyers, I want you to break your inspection into 3 different areas. There's going to be the things that if they don't fix those things you are absolutely going to cancel and back out of that deal. There are the things that you maybe want the seller to fix, but aren't necessarily deal breakers. And then there's your honey to-do list of things that you can take care of after closing as well. And understand that during an inspection contingency, you can actually cancel your purchase agreement for any reason that you want. And you will get that earnest money check back. Usually takes 7 to 10 days, but you will not be getting the money back that you paid to the inspector for his or her time on that property. During inspections, we can ask for repairs. We can ask for concessions, such as money from the seller to help you offset those costs when you get to the closing table. You could ask for a reduced in purchase price, or again, you can cancel for any reason and get that earnest money check back to you. Typically, what we write is what's called an inspection contingency removal, asking for repairs, concessions, price reductions, or again, you can cancel that purchase agreement for any time. And that's a pretty straightforward process. If you have an inspection contingency, the seller has to sign off on that cancellation. So just make sure that you're aware of that as well. After the inspection contingency is removed, or if you didn't have one, we'll be ordering the appraisal right away. You should at this point already have been in communication with your loan officer or the bank who's helping with the financing as well. If there's financing involved, we will order an appraisal. Typically, I see those range anywhere from $400 to $700 for the appraiser for his or her time. We do not get to choose who the appraiser is. Neither does a loan officer, neither does the seller. They are a person who's metaphorically drawn out of a hat, and they go out there and their job is to assess and give an opinion of value on the property. This can be nerve-wracking for both you as a buyer and for the seller as well, because let's say you have a purchase agreement for $450,000 on a property, the appraisal comes back at $430,000. The seller is not under any obligation to sell to you at the $430,000. They can reject to do a reduction on there. So sometimes we have a renegotiations there, as far as maybe there's a situation where someone agrees to pay for 35. Typically, we try to get it at the 430, of course. But sometimes there's a negotiation there as well. And again, if the appraisal doesn't work out and we're not able to come to terms on that, you will get that earnest money check back, depending on how we write the purchase agreement. So again, make sure that the box is checked properly for when you are making an offer, so that you know that you're getting the earnest money check back. I have seen situations actually recently in the last 2 weeks where I saw an agent check that the earnest money, the offer was not contingent on financing, but there was financing involved. And the way that we read through that ultimately was that if they got through the inspection phase, which they did, that earnest money is now non-refundable and it goes to the seller because their purchase is not contingent upon financing. So make sure that the right box is checked as far as that goes, right? Again, in the midst of this, the loan officer will be in communications with you. They're going to be wanting to see your where you getting your assets. They want to see W-2 statements if you are employed, 1099s if you are self-employed. So they're going to be looking at these things as you are going throughout the purchase of your property, and it is very contract heavy here in real estate. So they're going to be wanting to verify your income, assets, credit history throughout the length from getting an accepted offer until the closing table. So don't do anything crazy in the midst of buying a house. Don't open up any credit cards. Don't buy a new car or finance a new car. Don't quit your job. Don't get married mid-transaction. That can really throw things off as well. I've seen that happen too. So make sure that you are aware of those things as well. Typically, the loan officer is going to give you a loan estimate in the first 5 to 10 days after you get an accepted offer, giving you kind of an idea of what your payment and your out-of-pocket expenses are going to be. When we get closer to the closing table, after the appraisal is complete and the underwriting's done, and they say that you are clear to close on the property, they're going to issue a closing disclosure, and that has to be signed 3 days before you get to the closing table. Just verifying what those down payment, out-of-pocket expenses are going to be, what your monthly payment is going to be. Sometimes there are slight little variations between what that is and what it is at the closing table. And then we try to do our final walkthrough, which is not an inspection. A final walkthrough is where we walk through the property to verify that it's in acceptable condition to when it is that you initially looked at it. It's not a situation where you can just back out because the faucet is loose or something like that. There are situations where we have canceled during the final walkthrough, such as, water in the basement, tree fell in a house, things like that can happen. But understand it is not an inspection. It's just so that you can walk through the property, make sure the sellers have done what it is that they said they were going to do. I try to do that a day or two before closing, just because I want to make sure that if something does go wrong, we have a little bit of time to figure that out as well. Opinions on that can vary as well. Sometimes we do it the day of. From there, we have the closing table. The closing table is usually about 45 minutes to an hour long. You're going to be signing a bunch of paperwork. It's about that thick, depending on what sort of type of financing it is that you are doing. We crack a bunch of jokes. We take pictures at the end, and my hope is to get a 5-star review from all of my clients. I hope you can tell by now that my goal is to give people a good experience before, during, and after the purchase of the property. If you've been around Rochester for a while, you'll see that I come highly recommended. I'm one of the most referred real estate agents here in the Rochester, Minnesota area, just because I actually take care of my clients. The service side of things is not just a word to me. I actually want people to feel good about working with me as well. Again, if you are looking to make a move here in the Rochester, Minnesota area, I would love to be your personal real estate professional. I promise that we will have a good time as we're out there shopping. I try to make this a lot of fun for my clients. I typically will meet with my clients at one of the local restaurants here in town. I'm really close friends with a lot of the staff, general managers, a lot of the great restaurants here in Rochester. My favorite places are 5 West, Tap House, and the Workshop over on the southeast side as well. But I usually tell my buyers, depending on your experience in purchasing a home, usually it takes anywhere between 60 and 90 minutes for me to get an overview as far as everything goes. And I don't want people to feel like if you are moving here from out of state, which a significant portion of my clients do move here from out of state, I usually will do a video Zoom call with you and go over everything. I promise that you will walk away from that meeting knowing everything it is that you need to expect as you are making a purchase here in the Rochester, Minnesota area, and you will be feeling much more comfortable about the whole process overall. There are a lot of moving parts in real estate, and there's a lot of noise too. And I feel like once you understand how all the pieces really fit together, it's much easier for you to make good, informed, and intelligent decisions and get what it is that you are ultimately looking for. So to summarize, always make sure you understand what your financing situation and options are. Make sure you hire a great real estate agent. Make sure they understand how the process works overall so that you are able to make good, informed, intelligent decisions out there as well. If you are looking to make a move here in Rochester, reach out to me directly. My contact information will be everywhere. I do respond to my phone calls and text messages. If I don't respond to you right away, understand that I will get back to you within 5 minutes, but you will find that I'm a very responsive real estate professional. It's a core value of mine. And I certainly hope to have the opportunity to earn your business down the road and show you what I feel makes my strategy so special and unique here in the Rochester, Minnesota area. And I hope to have the opportunity to see you down the road. Cheers.